change your advert. And this just felt
step backwards.
So regressive. It was just Meghan in an April with a lot of her female friends and Daniel Martin, her makeup artist, preparing and prepping food in the kitchen. And I mean, you don't even see her go out and do anything else apart from buy flowers. And for me, I'm just like, what is this new version of Meghan that she's trying to sort of position? It feels very old school, regressive, not modern. And she has...
And not authentic.
Every platform in the world to be... She's not in the royal family anymore in terms of a working member of the royal family. She can be as punchy as she likes. This is just so not punchy. So Kate, on Sunday, the King met President Zelensky. But more importantly, that meeting happened just days after the Oval Office Trump-Zelensky bust-up.
So let's recap how the week unfolded. On Thursday last week, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer met President Donald Trump at the White House, where he presented Trump with the invitation letter from King Charles for a second state visit. Now, traditionally, second-term US presidents are not offered a second state visit. Instead, they come for tea or lunch with the monarch at Windsor Castle. But Sir Keir said Donald Trump's last state visit in 2019 had been a tremendous success, and that the invitation for a second visit was truly historic and unprecedented.
All good so far. But then, just a day after that invite was hand-delivered by the Prime Minister in the Oval Office, the world witnessed the shocking fallout between Trump, Vance and Zelensky. And in the days that followed, the UK welcomed President Zelensky to London as Starmer hosted a summit on Ukraine with leaders from across Europe to shore up support for Ukraine. And then, wait for it, President Zelensky says, "Thank you very much, and any chance of tea with the King." So if you're King Charles, what do? You accept.
The request came through the British government, which then went to the palace, and King Charles was very keen to accept. He's been outspoken about how much support he's given Ukraine and how, we're all behind Ukraine. He's talked about the indescribable aggression that Russia has shown the country and has been very outspoken on that. So, of course, he was going to meet him, but it seemed extremely warm, didn't it? He was greeted on the steps of Sandringham House, the private Norfolk estate.
On a cosy Sunday.
On a cosy Sunday, brought in for a fireside chat in the saloon where they had tea, we're told, and nearly an hour of discussion, which is quite a long time for an audience, particularly on a Sunday, I would say.
I think it's really important to remember that we are always told, and it's emphasised to us regularly from the palace, that the King acts on the advice of the government. But nobody can make the King do what he really doesn't want to do. And I don't think anyone would have to. He would have been very keen to have met Zelensky. He's hosted him before at Buckingham Palace. And as you say, he's been very outspoken. But the optics of that were extraordinary. The optics of that of last week and the choreography and the timing of Starmer goes to the Oval Office. He's war-gamed that meeting. So he absolutely plays a blinder with Trump and Vance.
He pulls the letter out of his jacket pocket, has Trump open it, and it's a warm letter from the King.
Yeah. But kind of holds his own when it comes to the other things that he's asking for. And Trump comes out in the presser and says he's a tough negotiator. He was negotiating hard over lunch in terms of the trade deal. Then we have an almighty bust-up with Zelensky, who, some people now in the government and our government are saying that we didn't prepare him. The UK government didn't prepare him enough for that meeting. And then Starmer hosts him here with Macron and lots of other European leaders, and then he goes off to see the King, which is basically, without the government sticking and the King sticking two fingers up to Trump, it's them saying, let's put our arms around Zelensky and see what we can do about this.
Literally as well, because we saw kind of the big hug from Starmer as Zelensky came in. And again, like you say, the optics of him outside number 10 Downing Street, there was a big hug. He was enveloped in that kind of summit. And then there was a joint photograph with him right in the middle of it, and then gets in the helicopters up to Sandringham to see the King. And now those pictures...
Doesn't put a suit on. You don't need a suit for a king.
You don't need a suit for a king. Churchill didn't wear a suit when he went to the Oval Office during the Second World War, as was pointed out. But he lands in his helicopter and comes out. And I think what's interesting is they put out those pictures from the King's private estate. They were released through the official channels before the meeting had even happened to make sure they got there for the bulletin. So the king really knew what he was doing. I mean, it's been described to me as him playing a kind of a threefold diplomatic role. So first of all, he's representing Europe and the European support for Ukraine. Second of all, he's keeping America sweet, as we saw with that very nice letter that he wrote to Trump, telling him how special it was, how unprecedented this really special invitation was. And by the way, come for a state visit, but first of all, come for an informal visit, maybe at Balmoral, Dumfries House, and we can chat through the finer details of the pomp and pageantry of the second state visit. So there's America, and then there's also the third wheel, which is the Commonwealth. And then we saw that play out the following day when we had Justin Trudeau going up to Sandringham, the Canadian Prime Minister, because of course the King is
King of Canada.
King of Canada.
I thought
and we haven't heard much about that Canadian connection, to be honest. And Canada's really coming in for a battering from Trump with the trade tariffs. And
I thought what was fascinating was Trudeau putting that statement out afterwards. So we never get readouts from audiences with the palace, as much as we want to, unless you have someone like Joe Biden and Donald Trump who gave great readouts. But I thought what Trudeau put on X was fascinating because he tweeted that photo, which the palace did put out, and he said that his meeting with the king, he said, we spoke about matters of importance to Canadians, including, above all, Canada's sovereign and independent future. So he clearly let it be known, and he wouldn't have done that without the nod from the palace and the king, that he could do that he and Charles talked about Canada's sovereign future. And that's a direct, finger pointing at Donald Trump, who has taunted Justin Trudeau for the last month being in office, calling him Governor Trudeau, saying Canada should be the 51st state of America. Well, I think you'll find, Donald Trump, that the king is King of Canada. It's one of his most important realms. And that message from Trudeau on X clearly showed that King Charles is no fan of President Trump's plan to de-realm Canada and turn it into the 51st state. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it was fascinating, wasn't it? I think it was a very, like you say about the optics, it's the words that are chosen. It was very kind of measured in terms of what we'd seen in the Oval Office take part between Trump and Vance and Zelensky, but it was powerful. It really packed a punch, didn't it? And even before he went to see the king, the day before, Trudeau was giving interviews to live TV cameras saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to see the king. I'm going to talk to him about our sovereign nation and about how we're an independent country. And I thought, yes, you're making sure that that meeting happens. You're making sure that everybody knows why you're meeting. It's not just about Canada's support for the Ukrainians. It's about your own, fighting for your own space and your own identity.
It's really interesting talking about the global leaders. We've had a lot of chat recently about this need for a security backstop, haven't we, in Ukraine? But listening to Justin Trudeau and, seeing Zelensky go to see the king when they're pretty much at war with Donald Trump over certain issues, it's almost like the king is a security backstop for global leaders.
Absolutely. He's going to him soft power behind Britain and behind the Commonwealth.
Please, can you talk some sense maybe into it's all reminded me of when I sat down with him a few years ago, and we were in Davos at the World Economic Forum.
The peacekeeper line that you got from him.
He was on his way to the Middle East. It was fascinating. It was a tense time. Harry and Meghan had just said they were off. We're in January 2020. They've just said they were off. I thought they'd cancelled the interview with him. Off we went. He was on his way to the Middle East. So he was going into sort of, warring areas.
And interfaith dialogue.
It was very clear that it had been difficult to ask him about the war in his own family, which he still hasn't managed to solve. But when we were talking about the Middle East, he said, I've spent much of my life trying to bring people together. And I said to him, do you consider yourself a peacemaker? And he said, I try. I'd rather be a peacemaker. And I feel like that's what we're seeing now. That legacy of him convening people, treading the diplomatic tightrope walk between warring leaders. It's all coming to the fore now.
This was all happening as Prince of Wales. And when you spoke to him, did he seem pleased with that role? I mean, is that something that he was kind of relishing? Because he is determined to do that. That was all the guidance this week, that he's determined to play the role, that he's not going to shy away from it. Even though he's in his mid-70s, still undergoing cancer treatment. This is his raison d'etre. It's always been bringing people together.
He was. I think for him, then as Prince of Wales and now as King, suddenly like being thrust forward in a way that none of us even thought a few weeks ago he would be. That role as peacemaker, that role as, if I can have a word with Zelensky and say, perhaps try this approach with Donald Trump, if I can still keep Donald Trump sweet with the idea of a state visit and a trip to Balmoral, that's a unique position for someone on the global stage.
And there is nobody else, I don't think, who could play that role, really.
No.
I can't think of anybody else who could stand in and play that role, really.
Of course, what a lot of people say when people write about his legacy being the peacemaker is, well, he still hasn't managed to find peace with his own warring family and his warring sons. But I think there
is a sense of peace, having made peace with the conflict within his family, though. I get the sense that, he hasn't seen Harry. These things sort of rumble on, we'll come on to Meghan's new TV show. But it does feel like that's as sorted as it's ever going to be. It doesn't feel like it's still boiling up every few months like it was the last few years. That does seem to there's a lid on that now.
If he could keep a lid on Donald Trump.
Wow.
That would be good.
Trump was thrilled with that invitation, wasn't he? When Sir Keir Starmer pulled that out of his pocket, the Trump card, all the puns intended. And to be a fly on the wall when they have tea at Balmoral, if Trump comes over to play golf at one of his golf courses in Scotland. I think that would be a real moment, won't it?
It definitely will. I mean, the timing of that's going to be fascinating.
The Canada thing makes it more complicated. I think that's going to be difficult. How can the King persuade Donald Trump to leave Canada alone?
Well, I think, Donald Trump taunting Justin Trudeau in Canada about becoming the 51st state is just taunting. I don't see that ever happening. The tariffs thing is much more difficult in terms of, I'm not sure the King would really be able to persuade Donald Trump when it comes to cutting deals and tariffs on a realm. But watch this space. Maybe he'll come up
maybe
over
the King
cucumber sandwiches.
The kingmaker. Maybe he'll be the deal maker.
About those tariffs, President. Anyway, it is fascinating. And I think you're right. I think Charles absolutely thrives on that role, and good for him because he's clearly quite good at it.
Seems to be.
Listeners of this podcast will know that we've recently been talking rather a lot about the much anticipated Netflix show With Love, Meghan.
Indeed. It's the Duchess of Sussex's foray back into the world of what they like to call lifestyle content, with the series where she shares personal tips and tricks, embracing playfulness over perfection, and highlighting how easy it can be to create beauty, even in the unexpected. That's the description according to Netflix.
Ahead of the release this week, two things have happened. One, Meghan gave an interview to, you guessed it, People magazine in the USA, which has been described as her most intimate interview in years. And we'll come on to that later. And
the Duchess hosted a screening of the programme before its global premiere for a select few fans who have followed her since she started her lifestyle blog, The Tig, which began in 2014, and she shut it down after she got engaged to Harry in 2017.
In the People magazine interview, she talked about what life is like for the Sussexes in Montecito and how they get a Chinese takeaway every now and then. But unlike many of us who just eat a Chinese takeaway out of the Chinese takeaway containers, Meghan said, even when I get takeout, I will try to plate it beautifully. Fair enough.
Well, what was really interesting about the People magazine was how little reference she made to the UK or their time there. And the Netflix show was no different. It had very little mention of the royal family or Britain.
So, could this be a new version of the Sussexes we're seeing, where they really have truly moved on, and we need to take Meghan at face value as an actress who's now extending her skills to the lifestyle genre? And so this is With Love, Meghan.
And here's what the reviews had to say. Carol Midgley in The Times writes, the series is full of immaculately tasteful domestic tips from Montecito and relentless smiling, but it is a performative kind of joy.
Carol also said, if you thought With Love, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex's new lifestyle show would be a smug, syrupy endurance watch, and that you would rather fry your eyeballs than sit through it, I have news for you. It is so much worse than that.
Oh dear.
The Mashable Newsnight was kinder. It said, if you thrive on lifestyle shows or TikTok videos about hosting guests or making your own anything at home, you might like this.
You might like it. And Vogue writes, With her new brand, As Ever, Markle is clearly planning a bold re-entry to the lifestyle space. But while the TIG often featured interviews with other tastemakers, in As Ever, the main draw is meant to be Markle herself. Well, first of all, we know now not to call her Markle.
Never call her Markle.
Doesn't like that.
She does not like that.
She wants to be known as Sussex. But what did you make of it, Roya?
I have watched it all 8 episodes. I went into it as open-minded as I possibly could in terms of thinking this really is the new
objective
Meghan. Wanted to go into it objectively. It's not my vibe. It's really not my vibe. It's not my vibe for a few reasons. I think...
Is this just not the sort of thing you would normally like?
It's not really my kind of programme, but I think it lost me. She lost me at the point where I saw her chopping shallots and putting them into an ice bath before making a vinaigrette. There were too many sort of sprinkle edible flowers on everything. There was too much quest for perfection. Who has got time for all of that? Who is it for? I watched it and just thought... I want to see sort of some of the kind of behind the scenes, authentic, when things are a little bit difficult or you're a little bit short of time, this is how you could put up something, quite what. It was just all so curated. And for me, that takes away from Meghan's quest for authenticity. My other issue with it was, what I like about Meghan is that she had previously positioned herself as a punchy, independent woman who sort of stands up for women's rights, gender equality, has sort of fingers in lots of pies of really, some interesting causes around women, lifting women up, don't be in the kitchen. Famously, she's told everyone who'll listen 1,000 times that when she was young, she, wrote to the washing up
liquid manufacturers to say, it's not just women who use your product.
Change your advert. And this just felt...
Step backwards.
So regressive. It was just Meghan in an April with a lot of her female friends and Daniel Martin, her makeup artist, preparing and prepping food in the kitchen. And you don't even see her go out and do anything else apart from buy flowers. And for me, I'm just like, what is this new version of Meghan that she's trying to sort of position? It feels very old school, regressive, not modern. And she has...
And not authentic.
Every platform in the world to be... She's not in the royal family anymore in terms of a working member of the royal family. She can be as punchy as she likes. This is just so not punchy.
No, I agree. I think it was, I had so many issues with it. I just thought, much like the kind of stealth wealth outfit of beige cashmere jumpers that she appears in endlessly after outfit change, they all look the same. Well, the clothes annoyed me because they were just clearly not practical at all. The kind of white billowing shirt, all the layers of beige. And often she wasn't wearing an apron. And I did not notice one single oven glove.
The one thing, you're absolutely right, the one thing we did learn is that she doesn't like being called Meghan Markle, because in that exchange with Mindy Kaling, the actress, it was quite testy. Mindy was like, called her Meghan Markle, and she went, you keep calling me Meghan Markle, you do know I'm Sussex now. And, she obviously wants to get rid of that identity, previous, pre-royal identity. But the thing is, actually, she should be proud of that.
Well, I thought...
Independent working woman. That's what she came into the royal family as, like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, be proud of your maiden name. I mean, I think that it was a shot across the bow to the royal family, wasn't it? People have said, they're not allowed to use their HRH for commercial purposes. People have said, go further. They should have their Duke and Duchess of Sussex title stripped from them. So this was, I think, her saying, look, this is my family name. This is sacred. This is what we like. Having said that, she doesn't really use Sussex in any of the branding of, her raspberry spread, as she calls it, and things like that. So it did feel like her setting out her stall from that point of view. But all the guests that come around, I mean, they just kind of... They're just praising her and saying how wonderful she is. Oh, tell me about how your fashion's so beautiful. Tell me about how you're so hip and young.
It felt very remote.
The whole thing was designed to be a kind of a big love-in for her, culminating in this big crescendo at the end, where in the final episode we see her hosting this brunch for family and friends. I'll come on to the mum in a minute, because that was interesting,
didn't it?
It felt very unrelaxing. Please nibble, graze, there's loads of food.
I've labelled the coffee state. Everything is labelled. Oh, imagine having that much time to label everything.
Yeah, and then she gives this speech, which I think is sort of unintentionally hilarious, in which she sort of says, Thank you. You know, normally you stand up and you say thank you for coming. And do you know what? I love you guys. You've been, my heart goes out. You're marvellous. I think you're
reversed,
great.
Wasn't it?
It was reversed. It was thank you for loving me.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard a speech like that in my life.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite extraordinary. And the mother, who we're
Roya.
told she didn't feature, and fair enough, you know, she's a private individual.
She is a private person,
But
yeah.
we're told beyond being told that she had the first number 1 of 50 of those jam jars that she sent out. She was that felt very kind of, very blink and you miss it, that part of the relationship, which I thought was interesting. But maybe mum's camera shy, who knows? And then we didn't see much of Harry.
No
either,
Harry.
did we?
I mean, hardly any Harry, literally just at the end.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. And I wonder, you know, there's been sources close to Sussex are saying, and that's because he wants it very much to be her thing.
Maybe.
It felt old school, but not in the kind of cool old school kind of way. It just felt too trad wife, and it felt too remote. It didn't feel accessible at all to anyone other than whoever lives in a very rarefied lifestyle in Montecito.
It's not your vibe. No, I think I'm getting that.
But
I'm feeling that.
I think that, you know, there'll always be a lot of noise around people saying, oh, well, the British media just steered against her. Well, if you look back, traditionally, you know, we weren't. But actually, the response in America has been fascinating because Variety
magazine really went to town saying that it was, you know, it was poor.
Not fans. In the same way that
it's dull.
Vanity Fair, when they did that takedown piece, having always given them regular coverage, I think for the Sussexes and for Meghan, to see Variety, who did that quite gushing interview with her a couple of years ago, absolutely excoriating review of As Ever and With Love Meghan, I think that'll sting.
Yeah.
And possibly make her and Netflix think, Well,
it said season 1. I mean, one wonders if there's going to be a season 2.
What do you think that'll be dependent on?
I imagine it's like everything, isn't it? It's a commercial enterprise. So is it going to be successful? Are the viewers going to be there? I think they will be for the first and second episodes. Are they going to stick with it to the end? Unlikely.
I wouldn't have done if I hadn't felt I'd needed to watch it for work purposes.
No, I didn't learn. I just felt it was a missed opportunity as well. Like there is a gap in the market for that sort of thing. You know, I loved all the lifestyle stuff. It's great to see her in this beautiful kitchen looking out at a swimming pool, but we didn't even see much of the house. You know, I would have loved to have seen, you know, we saw a few.
We see her kitchen garden.
Shot.
Yeah.
She made such a big deal about why she wasn't filming it in her own house. In the People magazine interview, she talks about, well, it was, you know, impractical because I've got 2 small children. I want it to be our home to be their haven. And of course, I've got 80 crew filming. 80 crew? You know, how are there 80 people filming this show? And
well, the People magazine interview was interesting.
It's still not very good
because there were attempts in that to make her sound much more low key than what we've seen in the series. In that she talks about how, I often just like, you know, Harry and I will go to restaurants and not just private rooms. We walk into restaurants and eat in restaurants.
Not only that, she goes to yoga classes
where there are 50 other people in there.
She goes to yoga classes
with other people. I know. So that was an interesting attempt to go, I'm normal just like you.
But it's not, is it? It's saying I'm normal just like you, but actually reinforcing this idea that I'm super special. And it's really special that I go to a communal yoga thing. It's the same thing with the condescending thing about the flowers on breakfast cereal. Anybody can do it, you know. Parents, I don't have time for that. I'm not going to get up Saturday morning, I'm taking my kids swimming, I'm taking them to football practice. I am not making a blueberry, you know, you have this blueberry rainbow, and I do give my kids fruit. Of course I do. Am I going to sprinkle edible flowers on their breakfast?
So many edible flowers.
No chance in hell.
I think my favourite exchange, there were some absolute corkers. I mean, I wrote down some of my absolute favourite quotes. There were quite a few. I think my favourite exchange was when Mindy Kaling at the end, where they're sitting over this immaculate tea party that Meghan has apparently created all by herself, and she's showing the, you know, goodie bags for the kids that don't have any sugar in them. They have Manuka honey sticks instead and seeds. It was when Mindy Kaling said, "This is wonderful, Meghan. Why don't you come round to mine and I'll show you how I microwave burritos." When she said a bit puzzled by that. Microwave burritos?
She wasn't quite on message, was she, Mindy Kaling? It made it quite fun because she said, Meghan said, do you really go all out for your kids' party? And she goes, well, the woman I hired does. Which is my vibe.
She seemed to be
more
sort of
real, wasn't she?
She was. Anyway, I think
there was, but that's the thing. Now I'm looking for it on my phone because I wrote a note of this because the quotes, in a way, the quotes were the quotes are the things that you don't actually, people talk about mainly British press or whatever it may be, or people being silly about it, but it's actually some of the quotes just speak for themselves. Meghan said about making a balloon arch. The first time I had the fascinating adventure of doing this manually, it can really start to get tiresome on your cheeks. So instead, there is a great little device you can buy. It's a balloon pump.
Yeah, can you? I mean,
that's verbatim from the show.
I know.
That's what we're dealing with.
If there's a second series, I don't think I'll be tuning in, is all.
I think you'll have to for the podcast.
Speaking of learning new things, Kate, this week, the Prince of Wales delivered a message to mark St. David's Day. And for the first time, that message from William was in Welsh. William has been learning some Welsh along with the Princess of Wales, and they've also been helping Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis learn a few phrases too.
Unlike his father, though, who studied the language at university when he was Prince of Wales, William has used the Duolingo app for his message, celebrating Wales's National Day. How very 2025.
His message translates to... I'm not going to read it in Welsh.
I was about to say.
No, I'm going to read you
going to do it in?
The translation, because I've not been learning Welsh. Hello. Today on St. David's Day, we come together to celebrate Wales, its history, its culture, and its incredible people. From its incredible landscapes to its language, Wales continues to inspire. Today, we celebrate everything that is magical about Wales. To all the people of Wales and to everybody around the world, happy St. David's Day. So do you reckon he nailed it, Kate?
As a
trained Welsh ear.
As a non-Welsh speaker, I would, have to give it to him. I think, good on him for learning it.
He was confident in his delivery, I thought.
He was. I mean, he's only really said Borodar that I've heard him say before, and I'm sorry if I've pronounced that wrong. But it is about time that he started to speak a bit of Welsh, I
agree.
Would say.
Yes. There were no complaints from Michael Sheen, the actor who's previously been quite whingy about the role of the Prince of Wales and the existence of the title and the fact... I thought it was interesting that he decided to do that. I mean, we've had, when he took on that title, we had Kensington Palace say, well, we're going to stop posting on Twitter and later X in Welsh as well. Then we're going to get S4C, the Welsh broadcaster, along to the engagements in Wales. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was interesting to hear from him with his little daffodil buttonhole speak seemingly quite fluently.
Eloquently, yes.
And a friend of the King's told me that the King was very touched that William has been learning Welsh.
Finally pulled his finger out to Welsh.
Well, yes, because the King obviously went to Aberystwyth before his investiture.
Yeah, but also this is at a time when, to be fair to William as well.
Different time in his life.
Quite a lot on his plate as, in his 40s, 3 young children and a wife who's not been well. And the King, when he was Prince of Wales, investiture age 21 in Carnarvon and had much more time to learn these things and could just see his future stretching out ahead of him as a Prince of Wales with a very healthy and quite young mother as a king. Yeah. As a queen, sorry.
Here's a question, Kate.
Go on. It's not in Welsh, is it?
Well, it's a question I'd really like to ask William, but I'll ask you instead.
Okay, I'll channel my inner Prince of Wales.
Do you think he might use Duolingo to learn a bit of French? Because I can remember being with William in Quebec in Canada back in the day on their first overseas trip. I think it was in 2011 when they went to Canada and California as newlyweds. And he did deliver a speech to members of the military in Quebec in French. It wasn't great.
Oh dear.
And
the Queen's French was pretty good.
She was fluent. The King's French isn't bad either.
It's not bad.
And I just think in the fullness of time, when he becomes King of Canada, wouldn't be a bad thing if he's brushing up on his Welsh, brush up on a bit of French.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure he's ever going to win the Quebecois over. They're not known for being monarchists. Add that to your to-do list, William.
There you go.
Well, I look forward to hearing more Welsh from the rest of the Waleses in the future. If any Welsh speakers would like to let us know what they make of William's delivery and pronunciation, you can do so by emailing us at theroyals@thetimes.co.uk.
And on that note, Kate, hwyl fawr. Goodbye in Welsh.
Goodbye, Roya.
Bye, Kate.